I was picking up my prescription from the pharmacy when I heard my daughter's voice coming from the consultation room. Through the slightly open door, I saw Patricia talking to Dr. Miller in hushed tones. What I heard next made my blood freeze. Thank you for being here as I share the hardest story of my life. Drop a comment below, letting me know where in the world you are right now. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Harold Thompson, and at 58 years old, I thought I'd seen everything in my career as an insurance claims adjuster. 30 years of investigating fraud taught me to spot lies, read body language, and trust my gut when something felt off. I specialized in disability claims, auto accidents, the kind of cases where people tried to game the system for money. You learn to recognize when someone's story doesn't add up, when their pain seems performed rather than real, when the timeline doesn't quite fit. After I lost my wife Margaret 4 years ago, I retired to a quiet life in suburban Chicago. The house felt too empty without her laughter, too quiet without her voice calling me for dinner. Margaret had been my anchor for 28 years. She was the one who convinced me to take the insurance job in the first place, said my natural skepticism would be useful. You see through people's nonsense, Harry, she'd laugh. Might as well get paid for it. The empty house echoed with memories. Margaret's coffee mug still sat in the cabinet where she'd left it. Her books were scattered around the living room, bookmarks still in place. I couldn't bring myself to pack them away. Some mornings, I'd wake up and reach for her side of the bed, forgetting for just a moment that she was gone. My daughter Patricia became my lifeline during those dark months. At 32, she was everything I could want in a daughter. A registered nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, smart, compassionate, dedicated to helping people. She'd inherited Margaret's caring nature, but also had a practical streak that reminded me of myself. When Margaret got sick, Patricia had taken charge of the medical decisions with a competence that both impressed and comforted me. Patricia had married Gerald Hoffman 3 years ago, a pharmacist who worked at the same hospital system. Gerald seemed like a good match for her, quiet, steady, the kind of man who thought before he spoke. He treated Patricia well, and more importantly, he seemed to genuinely care about our family. They lived just 15 minutes away in a modest townhouse, and Patricia called me every day. Dad, you don't have to go through this alone, she'd always say. I'm here for whatever you need. She'd stop by twice a week with groceries or just to check on me. Sometimes she'd bring dinner, and we'd sit at the kitchen table talking about her work at the hospital, about patients she was helping, about the small dramas of daily life that kept us connected. Those visits were what kept me going through the worst of my grief. Patricia would tell me stories about her patients, the elderly woman in room 314 who flirted with all the male nurses, the businessman who kept trying to work from his hospital bed despite his heart attack. Her compassion for people reminded me so much of Margaret. Gerald would join us sometimes, usually bringing wine or dessert. He'd ask thoughtful questions about my insurance work, seemed genuinely interested in the cases I'd handled. You must have seen every kind of scam imaginable, he'd say. How do you know when someone's really hurt versus just trying to get money? I'd tell him about the tells, inconsistent stories, pain that didn't match the alleged injury, medical records that seemed coached rather than authentic. The human body doesn't lie, I'd explain, but people do, and they're usually not as good at it as they think. Then came the accident. 6 months ago, a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into my car at the intersection of Oak and Main. I remember driving through the intersection, seeing the green light, then nothing but twisted metal and sirens. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in Northwestern Memorial Hospital with Patricia holding my hand, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I thought I lost you, she whispered, squeezing my fingers. The relief in her voice was overwhelming. For a moment, lying there in that hospital bed, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. My daughter was there. She was taking care of me, and everything would be okay. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. The drunk driver had hit me going 50 miles per hour. My left leg was shattered in 3 places. My right ankle was crushed, and I had a concussion that left me foggy for weeks. 3 surgeries followed, pins in my leg, reconstruction of my ankle, months of physical therapy that left me exhausted and frustrated. But Patricia stepped up immediately. She took family leave from the hospital to care for me full time. Every morning she'd arrive at my house with a smile and a plan for the day. She had helped me with exercises, drive me to appointments, manage my medications with the precision you'd expect from a registered nurse. Gerald helped too, always asking about my medications, making sure I had everything I needed. "You raised an incredible daughter, Harry," he'd tell me. "She loves you so much." I felt grateful, blessed even, to have such devoted children. When people asked how I was managing, I'd tell them about Patricia and Gerald, about how lucky I was to have family who cared. The settlement talks were progressing well. My lawyer estimated the drunk driver's insurance would pay around $2.7 million. It seemed like a fortune, enough to ensure I'd never have to worry about money again, could afford the best care, maybe even travel like Margaret and I had always planned. But over the past few weeks, something had been bothering me. Small things, really. Things that triggered the same instincts I'd relied on for 30 years of insurance investigation. Patricia would give me my medications and watch me take them, something she'd never done before in the first few months of my recovery. "Dad, you need to take all of them," she'd insist when I'd try to skip what seemed like unnecessary pills. "Dr. Miller says they're crucial for preventing complications." The way she watched me swallow each pill reminded me of the surveillance videos I'd reviewed countless times in my career. That focused attention of someone monitoring specific behavior. My head felt foggy most days. I'd sit in my chair, staring at the TV, unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes. Shows I'd enjoyed for years seemed incomprehensible. Reading became impossible. The words would blur together, or I'd forget what I'd read by the time I reached the end of a paragraph. When friends called, Patricia would often answer my phone. "He's still recovering," she'd tell them, in her professional nurse's voice. "The doctors say he needs minimal stimulation right now. All the excitement just agitates him." My old colleague Vincent Rogers had called several times, but Patricia always intercepted. "Dad's having a rough day," she'd say. "Maybe try again next week." I started to feel isolated, cut off from the world I used to know. My Thursday poker group stopped calling after Patricia told them I was having episodes and couldn't handle social situations. The guys from the office, people I'd worked with for decades, gradually stopped reaching out. Patricia explained this was normal. "Brain injuries affect social functioning," she'd tell me when I complained about feeling lonely. "Dr. Miller says overstimulation can set back your recovery by months. I know it's hard, but I'm just trying to protect you." But Patricia was a nurse. She knew what was best for me, right? She'd graduated from Northwestern's nursing program, had worked in neurology for 5 years before switching to general medicine. If anyone understood brain injury recovery, it was her. Still, something felt off. My insurance background had taught me that when multiple coincidences line up, they usually aren't coincidences. The medications bothered me most. Before the accident, I'd taken a single blood pressure pill and a multivitamin. Now, I was on 8 different prescriptions: pain relievers, anti-anxiety medication, something for sleep, pills I couldn't identify. When I asked Patricia about them, she'd rattle off medical terms with the confidence of someone who'd spent years in hospitals. "This one prevents seizures," she'd explain, holding up a blue capsule. "Dr. Miller says head trauma patients often develop epilepsy months after the initial injury. We're being proactive." The yellow pills were for depression, the white ones for inflammation, the small green tablets for something called cognitive protection. Gerald would nod approvingly during these explanations. "Patricia knows what she's talking about, Harry. You're getting better care at home than most people get in the hospital." But sometimes I caught him looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not concern exactly, more like assessment. That Thursday afternoon in November, I had an appointment with Dr. Carol Miller, the neurologist who'd been treating me since the accident. Patricia usually drove me, but she had a work emergency at the last minute, something about a patient crisis at the hospital that required her immediate attention. "Gerald will take you instead," she said, kissing my forehead with the same practiced affection she showed her patients. "I'll meet you there as soon as I can." She gathered her purse and jacket with quick, efficient movements. "Make sure Dad takes his 2 o'clock pills," she told Gerald. "He's been trying to skip them lately." The ride to Dr. Miller's office was quiet. Gerald drove carefully, asking once if I was comfortable, if the car was too warm or too cold. The radio played soft, jazz, the kind of background music designed not to stimulate or agitate. Everything about my life had become soft, muted, carefully controlled. Dr. Miller's office was in a modern medical building downtown, all glass and steel and efficient lighting. The appointment went normally. Dr. Miller checked my reflexes with her little rubber hammer, asked about my pain levels on a scale of 1 to 10, tested my memory with simple questions about the date and the president's name. "You're making good progress, Harold," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had the kind of professional warmth that good doctors cultivate, friendly but not personal, caring but detached. "These new prescriptions should help with the lingering effects of your injury." She handed Gerald 3 new prescription bottles, speaking to him rather than to me. "The dosages have been adjusted based on his recent blood work. Make sure he takes them exactly as prescribed." Gerald nodded, slipping the bottles into his jacket pocket with practiced ease. After the appointment, I excused myself to use the restroom. Walking slowly down the hallway with my cane, the exercise still difficult after 6 months of recovery, I realized I'd left my coat in Dr. Miller's office. The building was cold, and Margaret had always insisted I dress warmly. Even now, 4 years after her death, I could hear her voice reminding me to take care of myself. As I approached the office door, moving as quietly as my cane would allow, I heard voices inside. The door was slightly ajar, probably left open when Gerald stepped out to make a phone call. I had seen him start in the hallway. What I heard through that crack in the door made me freeze in place, every instinct from 30 years of fraud investigation suddenly screaming that something was very, very wrong. "The settlement money should clear next week," Patricia's voice was saying, clear and businesslike through the crack in the door. $2.7 million, finally. "Doctor." Miller's voice responded with the same professional tone she'd used during my appointment. "Good. The medications are working perfectly. He's completely compliant now, isn't he? No more questions about the pills?" "None at all," Patricia laughed, and the sound sent chills down my spine. It wasn't the laugh I'd heard 1,000 times growing up, the one that reminded me of Margaret's musical giggle. This laugh was cold, calculating, satisfied. "He takes whatever I give him. Gerald's been adjusting the doses gradually. Dad doesn't suspect anything." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give me away. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to become invisible while still hearing every word. 30 years of investigating insurance fraud, and here I was, discovering the biggest fraud of my life in my own neurologist's office. "And the power of attorney papers?" Dr. Miller asked. "Signed last month when he was particularly foggy," Patricia said, with what sounded like pride. "He doesn't even remember doing it. I told him it was just routine paperwork for his medical care. He signed it without even reading." Power of attorney? I'd never signed anything like that. But even as I tried to remember, I realized there had been a day, maybe 5 weeks ago, when Patricia had brought me a stack of papers. "Just some insurance forms," she'd said. "The settlement company needs your signature." I'd been particularly tired that day, struggling with double vision from what I thought was my medication adjustment. I'd signed where she pointed, trusting my daughter to handle the details. The conversation continued, and I realized the scope of what my own daughter was doing to me extended far beyond anything I'd imagined. "Once we have full control of his finances," Gerald's voice joined in, and I could hear him moving closer to the door, "we can move to the next phase. The care facility in Florida is perfect. Remote location, minimal family visiting policies. He'll be comfortable there." "For how long?" Dr. Miller asked, with the casual tone of someone discussing dinner plans. Patricia's voice turned matter-of-fact, devoid of any emotion. "As long as necessary. The insurance settlement, plus his retirement savings and the house, it's close to $4 million total. We just need him manageable until everything transfers smoothly." $4 million. My life's work. The house Margaret and I had bought when Patricia was born. The retirement fund we'd carefully built over 30 years. It was all just numbers to them, but more than that, they were talking about disposing of me like a problem to be solved. "The medication adjustments I've been prescribing will ensure that," Dr. Miller said with clinical precision. "Progressive memory loss, decreased cognitive function, increased dependency. All thoroughly documented as normal progression from traumatic brain injury. No one will question the need for long-term care." I felt sick. These weren't medications to help me recover. They were chemical restraints designed to turn me into a compliant victim while my daughter systematically stole everything I'd worked for. Dr. Miller, the woman I'd trusted with my recovery, was slowly destroying my mind with prescription drugs. "What about his friends?" Gerald asked. "Some of them have been persistent about visiting. That Vincent guy from his old job keeps calling." "I've handled that," Patricia said dismissively. "I told them he's having episodes, becoming confused and agitated around strangers. They think it's brain damage from the accident progressing. No one questions a registered nurse's medical assessment." Vincent Rogers had been my partner at the insurance company for 15 years. We'd solved hundreds of cases together, developed an almost telepathic understanding of when something didn't smell right. Vincent would know I wasn't having episodes. He'd recognize the signs of something else entirely. "The beauty of this is that everything looks completely legitimate," Gerald continued, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Medical records show progressive cognitive decline. The power of attorney is legally binding, and once he's in that Florida facility, he'll be too confused to cause any trouble. Even if he tried to complain, who would believe a brain-damaged old man over medical professionals? They had thought of everything. Patricia's nursing credentials gave her credibility with doctors, social workers, anyone who might question the situation. Gerald's pharmaceutical knowledge ensured the right combination of drugs to keep me compliant without killing me outright. Dr. Miller's medical authority provided the documentation to justify every step. I needed to get out of there before they discovered me listening. Moving as quietly as possible with my cane, I made my way back to the waiting room, my mind racing through everything I'd just heard. 30 years of investigating fraud had taught me that perpetrators always reveal more when they think they're safe. What I just overheard was a complete confession. When Patricia arrived 10 minutes later, she was all smiles and concern, the perfect daughter caring for her disabled father. "How did it go, Dad? Dr. Miller said you're doing so well." She took my arm gently, supporting me as we walked to the car. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd loved unconditionally for 32 years, this person I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework and walked down the aisle at her wedding, and forced myself to smile. "Fine, honey, just tired." The drive home was torture. Patricia chatted about her day at the hospital, asking if I needed anything from the store, discussing what we should have for dinner. Every word felt like a performance, a careful script designed to maintain the illusion that she was my loving caretaker rather than my predator. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through everything I'd overheard. 30 years as a claims investigator had taught me one thing. When people think they've gotten away with fraud, they get careless. But they'd also taught me that investigating requires evidence, documentation, proof that would stand up in court. I needed more than an overheard conversation. But first, I had to stop taking whatever they were giving me. My foggy thinking, the memory problems, the inability to concentrate. It wasn't brain damage from the accident. It was systematic drugging by my own daughter. The next morning, Patricia brought me my usual collection of pills with my breakfast. 8 different medications in a small plastic cup, just like every morning for the past 3 months. "Here you go, Dad. Dr. Miller increased a couple of these to help with your recovery." She stood beside my chair, watching with the careful attention I'd seen nurses use with psychiatric patients. I pretended to take them, palming several while she watched. After she went to the kitchen to do dishes, I examined them carefully. The pills were different colors and shapes from what I'd been prescribed originally in the hospital. None matched the labels on the bottles Patricia kept in the medicine cabinet. These weren't pain medications or anti-inflammatories. I didn't recognize most of them, but their effects had been clear enough. Over the next few days, I started palming all the pills, pretending to take them while Patricia watched, then flushing them down the toilet later. The change was remarkable. The fog in my head began to clear like morning mist lifting from a lake. My memory sharpened. The overwhelming fatigue started lifting. I realized I'd been walking around in a drug-induced haze for months while my own daughter systematically stole my life and planned my elimination. With my mind clearing, I began investigating carefully. When Patricia went to the store or claimed to have errands, I searched the house I'd lived in for 20 years, but now felt like a prison. In her purse, I found a second set of keys to my safety deposit box, keys I'd never given her. In Gerald's jacket pocket, I discovered paperwork from my bank, showing account transfers I'd never authorized. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. The power of attorney document was hidden in their bedroom dresser under Gerald's socks. My signature looked convincing, but examining it closely with the magnifying glass I'd use for fine print investigation work, I could see subtle differences from my actual handwriting. They'd forged it, probably copying my signature from the legitimate insurance papers I'd signed over the months. Using skills I'd honed over 3 decades of fraud investigation, I started documenting everything methodically. I photographed the pills with my phone, comparing them to images I found online. Benzodiazepines for anxiety, opioids for pain, sedatives for sleep. A cocktail designed to keep someone compliant and confused. I photographed the forged documents, the unauthorized bank transfers, the spare keys. When Patricia was out, I called my old colleague Vincent Rogers, now running his own private investigation firm. Vincent had been my partner for 15 years. He'd know my voice, would recognize when something was genuinely wrong, versus the episodes Patricia had been describing to people. "Harry, Jesus, it's good to hear from you," Vincent said immediately. "Patricia said you weren't up for calls. How are you holding up?" "Vincent, I need your help," I said quietly, keeping my voice low in case Patricia returned early. "Something's wrong, very wrong." I told him everything. The overheard conversation, the pills that didn't match prescriptions, the forged power of attorney, the isolation from friends and family. Vincent listened without interrupting, and I could practically hear his investigator instincts engaging. "Harry, what you're describing sounds like systematic elder financial abuse," he said grimly. "And if they're using controlled substances to keep you compliant, we're talking about serious federal crimes. But we need more evidence, court-worthy documentation." Vincent helped me set up a small recording device in the living room, where Patricia and Gerald often discussed their plans, thinking I was upstairs asleep from the medications I'd supposedly taken. "Digital recordings are admissible if they're made in your own home," he explained. "Just don't let them know you're recording." 3 days later, Patricia and Gerald had another planning session, right in my living room. I'd gone upstairs early, claiming fatigue from my medication adjustments, then crept halfway down the stairs to monitor the recording device. "The transfer goes through Monday," Patricia was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the quiet house. "Once we have control of the settlement money, we can accelerate the timeline. The facility in Florida has an opening next month." "What about the house?" Gerald asked. 4-bedroom colonial in this neighborhood, it's worth at least $800,000. "Already handled. I've been in touch with a realtor. We'll list it as soon as he's safely in Florida. Medical power of attorney gives me full authority to make decisions about his living situation. My house. The house where Margaret and I had brought Patricia home from the hospital as a newborn, where she'd taken her first steps, had birthday parties, learned to drive. They were planning to sell it like any other asset. "What about his insurance investigation contacts? That Vincent guy keeps calling, and some of his old colleagues have been asking questions." "I've been handling them," Patricia said with confidence. "I told them Dad's condition is deteriorating rapidly. Early onset dementia accelerated by the brain trauma. They're backing off because they don't want to upset him." The recording device captured every word as they discussed their timeline, their methods, their complete plan to drain every asset I'd accumulated in 58 years of life. But more importantly, it captured their casual discussion of keeping me drugged and institutionalized indefinitely. That weekend, while Patricia thought I was napping upstairs, I called the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Agent Sandra Pierce listened to my story and reviewed the evidence I'd gathered over the past 2 weeks. The photographs, the recordings, the documentation of unauthorized financial transactions. "Mr. Thompson, what you've uncovered appears to be the part of a larger pattern," she said, after reviewing everything I'd sent her. "We've been investigating Dr. Miller for similar cases involving other elderly patients. Your evidence could be the breakthrough we needed." Agent Pierce explained that they'd been tracking suspicious prescription patterns and financial irregularities involving several elderly patients under Dr. Miller's care. "The problem is that elder abuse cases are difficult to prosecute because the victims are often isolated and confused by medication. Your professional background and clear documentation changes everything." Monday morning came with unusual activity in my house. Patricia was cheerful, almost giddy, humming while she made my breakfast. Gerald arrived early, carrying what looked like legal documents. "Dad, "I have some wonderful news," Patricia announced. "There's a specialized care facility in Florida that helps people with brain injuries like yours. The warm weather will be so good for your recovery." I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd once been my pride and joy, and felt a sadness deeper than the grief I'd experienced when Margaret died. At least Margaret's death had been honest, a tragedy I could understand. This was something else entirely, a calculated betrayal that violated everything I'd believed about family and love. "That sounds nice, Patricia," I managed to say, forcing my voice to stay calm. That afternoon, the FBI arrived. I watched from my living room. Window as 3 black sedans pulled into my driveway with practiced precision. Agent Pierce stepped out of the lead car, followed by 4 other agents. Patricia opened the door with her usual bright smile, the perfect daughter and caregiver, but I saw the exact moment she recognized what was happening. "Patricia Thompson Hoffman, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and unlawful distribution of controlled substances," Agent Pierce announced clearly. The look of shock on Patricia's face was genuine. For all her careful planning, she hadn't anticipated being caught. "There must be some mistake," she said, her nurse's training automatically kicking in with professional calm. "I'm a registered nurse. I've been caring for my father following his accident." "Gerald Hoffman, you're also under arrest on the same charges, plus violations of pharmaceutical dispensing laws and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." As they read them their rights, Patricia's eyes found mine through the window. For a moment, the mask slipped completely away. I saw not my loving daughter, but a stranger, cold, calculating, furious at being caught, rather than remorseful for what she'd done. "Dad, you don't understand," she called out as they led her to the police car, her voice taking on a desperate edge I'd never heard before. "Everything I did was for your own good. You needed help. You couldn't take care of yourself." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say to someone who could convince herself that drugging and robbing her own father was an act of love. The investigation revealed the full scope of their scheme. Dr. Miller had been prescribing inappropriate medications to at least 12 elderly patients, working with their family members to gain control of their finances through forged power of attorney documents. Gerald had been filling prescriptions with higher doses than prescribed, keeping the victims compliant and confused while their assets were systematically drained. Patricia had used her nursing credentials to gain trust with potential targets, always playing the concerned daughter or caregiver. The FBI discovered I wasn't even her first victim, just the most profitable. She'd practiced smaller versions of this scheme with 3 elderly patients at her hospital before targeting me. During the trial, 8 months later, I had to testify against my own daughter. Patricia sat at the defense table in a conservative blue dress, her hair pulled back in a style that made her look younger, more innocent. Her attorney tried to paint her as a devoted daughter who'd made errors in judgment while caring for her disabled father. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the forged documents, the unauthorized financial transactions, the testimony from other victims and their families painted a clear picture. Patricia and Gerald had stolen over $800,000 from me and nearly $2 million from other elderly victims over the past 2 years. When the judge asked if I had any final words before sentencing, I stood slowly, supporting myself with the cane I still needed, but no longer viewed as a symbol of weakness. "Your Honor, Patricia isn't sick or confused. She's a predator who used my love against me. She stole more than money. She stole my trust, my dignity, and my faith in family. The sentence should reflect the seriousness of betraying the people who love you most." Patricia was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Gerald received 12 years. Dr. Miller, who cooperated with investigators to expose similar schemes in other cities, got 8 years and lost her medical license permanently. Today, 18 months after that awful discovery in Dr. Miller's office, I'm walking again without assistance. Real physical therapy helped me regain strength. I've moved to a smaller house closer to town, made new friends through a support group for elder abuse survivors, and started consulting with the FBI to help identify similar schemes. The hardest part wasn't losing the money. We recovered most of it. It was losing the daughter I thought I had. But I've learned that the most dangerous predators are often the ones closest to us, and the best defense against betrayal isn't cynicism. It's trusting your instincts when something doesn't feel right. Age and experience aren't weaknesses that make us vulnerable. They're strengths that con artists fear most.